Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Glad to have with us this Monday morning State Senator Cathy Young. Senator Young, as always, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Senator, so many topics. Where do we start? The Child Victims Fund. Now, this came out in the news a few weeks ago where you came up with an alternative to the legislation that was being talked about in the state legislature. You have legislation that will, instead of suing, instead of going after big organizations, what it would be was, and tell me if I'm explaining this right, you take money out of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and for houses that they foreclosed on and money that they'd made there, and use that money to pay people who'd been victims of different types of child abuse. Do I have that right?
Right. So it's not just like housing and things like that, but it's criminal asset seizures. So it's asset seizures from criminal activity. Could be from a bank that did something wrong. It could be maybe an owner in a building. It could be a whole bunch of things. But the point is that the Manhattan DA, excuse me, is sitting on about $750 million in criminal asset funds, and actually he's been distributing it to organizations in 20 other states. And I think that money should go to crime victims in New York.
Yes, and Manhattan DA Cy Vance Jr. there in a bit of trouble for helping out or being too cozy with Harvey Weinstein too. But on the topic of what your legislation, if it passed, will do, this Child Victims Fund,
and would help every single victim. And sexual abuse toward children and adolescents is such a devastating crime, and it leaves victims with lasting psychological, emotional, and physical trauma. And when you look at the stats, Brian, it's horrific. The prevalence of childhood sexual abuse is difficult to come by, and it's felt that it's underreported, but it is estimated that approximately 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused. And so we need to do something about it. But 80%, it's been estimated that 80% of childhood sexual abuse, unfortunately, occurs in the home. It's committed by a family member or a neighbor or a babysitter.
In other words, someone who is not suable.
Exactly. And so in so many cases, the perpetrator doesn't have assets, doesn't have money. And so if you just pass the Child Victims Act where everybody can be sued, it excludes 80% of the victims. And, there is a reason why we want to help victims. Obviously, it's the right thing to do, but also because they have these lasting psychological or physical scars. They need counseling. They may have medical needs because of the abuse that they suffered. And so we want to make sure that they get the resources that they need so that they can have productive lives and break the cycle. And so that's the whole idea behind the Child Victims Fund. It's not taxpayer money. It's not raising taxes on anybody to pay for this. And there already is a precedent in New York State where we have the Crime Victims Fund, where we help people who are victims of crimes. This is a similar thing, but there would be actually a process where a victim could go through, fill out paperwork. There would be a claims administrator looking at it, deciding whether there's validity, first of all, to the story, and secondly, what they felt the victim would actually should get. And so it's called the Child Victim Reconciliation and Compensation Fund, but it would allow all time-barred victims of childhood sexual abuse to be compensated. And it would be done in a timely manner, efficient manner, and I really think this is the way to go. So that's why I'm pushing very hard to get this passed. We need to take action. And then the other part of the legislation actually would eliminate the statute of limitations going forward on the criminal aspect of childhood sexual abuse. There are a lot of crimes that have been left out, and all of those crimes need to be included. And so going forward, we need to make sure that the perpetrators are brought to justice.
Talking to State Senator Cathy Young, how is that legislature? How is that legislation doing? Where does it stand right now? The Child Victims Fund legislation.
Well, it's been moving in the Senate. We passed it out of the Senate Finance Committee, which I chair, recently, and it got a lot of bipartisan support. And so I'm pushing hard to get it to the floor. One of the main advocates for the Child Victims Act actually is very supportive of the Child Victims Fund legislation that I put in. His name is Gary Greenberg. He's a victim himself. He's been very vocal over the past few years to get something done, and he's totally on board, and he would like to see a result. And once we get it passed in the Senate, I'm hopeful that we can do that. I'm also hopeful that the Assembly will do the right thing and actually join us and pass the bill also.
Senator Young, moving on to the School Bus Camera Safety Act. You had a press conference earlier in the week about that. This would make it so that school buses not only have cameras to monitor the bus monitors and the drivers and the students, but cameras that could video cars and trucks and vehicles that drive by a stopped school bus. Tell us your thoughts on that passing.
Well, we have very dangerous situations every single day in New York State. It's actually estimated by a statewide group that handles people transportation that there are at least 50,000 illegal school bus passings every single day. And I saw some video recently at the press conference that we held. It's horrific when you see these cars blowing by these past school buses. I saw two kids almost, they came within inches of being mowed over. There's a lot more higher incidents now of cars passing stopped school buses on the right, which means they're passing on the same side as the door. It's bad enough when they pass on the left and a child has to cross the road. But a child that could be exiting the bus and have a car come up and ride on the right-hand shoulder and kill them. And we've had several incidents in New York State. There was a child who was hit just recently in Muncie, New York. Last year in Long Island, a child was hit. They're still, they had that child had head injuries, broken femur. That child is still in a wheelchair and is in therapy learning how to walk again. And so we need to do something about this. Actually, what the bill would do would be to allow schools that choose to do so, so it's not an unfunded mandate, but it would allow schools to participate in this program where they could purchase school bus camera, and it would go on the stop arm. We all know that when we come up to a stopped school bus, there's an arm that comes down that has a stop sign on it. The cameras would be attached to that. It doesn't video constantly. Basically what it does is that if a car, it only is activated if a car passes a stopped school bus that has its lights on. And if a car does that and makes that illegal move, then the camera will be activated at that point and just take a snapshot of the license plate on the car. Nothing else, not the person, not the car, just the license plate. But the way the law is right now, Brian, is that if someone blows by a stopped school bus, you need to have a police officer witness it, basically, in order for there to be anything that happens. And so it's impractical to think that we would be able to have have police officers following school buses around every single day and making sure that nothing happens. So this is a way to deal with it. If someone actually is caught passing a stopped school bus, there would be a $250 fine. Part of the fine would go toward the school to pay for the cost of the equipment, and the rest of it would go to the local government as it normally does.
Senator Young, do you hear from bus drivers on this issue? I'm guessing they would all support something like this.
Oh, my gosh, they are over the moon about it. And, every time you bring up this topic of people passing stopped school buses, they get so amped up. They are frustrated. They are upset. They say that they have near misses every single day. And think about that. This is our kids that they are charged with to deliver safely to and from school. They are very, very supportive of the legislation because they are just so fearful every single day that there's going to be some kind of tragedy that happens on their watch. They don't want to do it. And you think about school bus drivers. They're expected to do a lot of very important tasks all at the same time. They have to make sure that the kids in the back are behaving and that they're safe. When a child enters or exits the bus, they have to be focused like a laser on that child to make sure that they're crossing the road safely. And at the same time, if somebody blows by and they are expected to get a license plate number, for example, they just can't do it. They can't do everything at the same time. They have to pay attention to the kids first and foremost. So I think that this type of technology would be very useful, and once people understood that they can't get away with going around a stop school bus, and I don't know why people do it in the first place. I think people aren't paying attention. They're distracted. They're too much in a hurry, whatever the reason is. But this type of technology actually has been used in other states, about 15 other states. And in those states, when they installed these stop arm cameras, the incidence of passing stop school buses dropped dramatically. And that's what this is really about. It's about keeping our kids safe.
Senator Young, I want to get to Brittany's Law, but first I want to talk about the governor's red flag legislation. Now, am I understanding that correctly if I say that the governor wants to make it legal for school teachers, school administrators, police officers, and family members to be able to approach I guess it would be a district attorney and say, or law enforcement and say, student John Q. Public X here is dangerous and could have access to a weapon and should have that weapon taken away. Is that the way it works?
Well, actually, what the governor is proposing is to allow just about anybody to go to court and take away someone's guns. And it's not well thought out. And frankly, there's already a system in place in New York State whereby if somebody is a danger to themselves or others, there is a process where someone can make a report. So the way it would work, there was a Supreme Court case several years ago, in 1976, where it's called the Tarasoff case, but there was a young woman. She met this man. He thought they were dating. He thought that there was more to the relationship than she did. He told his psychiatrist that he was going to kill her, and the psychiatrist didn't do anything, and the woman ended up being stabbed to death by this man. And there was a Supreme Court case after that that said that mental health professionals can report if they feel that one of their patients is going to either kill himself or hurt someone else. So it's well established in law. In New York, what can happen is that if somebody is a danger to themselves or others, and say a family member thinks that, they can report it to a mental health professional, or if a mental health professional has somebody in therapy or they're aware of somebody, they can report it also to the county. The county in turn tells the State Division of Criminal Justice Services, who will investigate and try to find out whether it's a founded report or not. If they find out that the person is a danger to themselves or others, there's severe mental illness involved, then they can take action to remove someone's weapons.
So what you're saying is it's already on the books. Why would the governor do this? And if not to answer my own question, but the criticism against Governor Andrew Cuomo from the conservatives has always been that he's building a resume to run for president. He wants to be first to do this, first to pass that. Could that be what we're dealing with here, or is it just not well thought out? What do you think, Senator?
There's no question about it. He's in a primary right now with Cynthia Nixon, who is, from Manhattan, and she's very much to the left of him, even though he's gone very left. So he's trying to outdo her. And I really honestly believe that this is, partially grandstanding. He's up for re-election this year. But it just doesn't make sense. And the most illogical part of it is, so under his legislation that he's proposing, you would take away someone's guns, but leave the dangerous person out in the community to do whatever they're going to do. It just doesn't make sense to me.
As if there was no other weapon that could be used.
Right. It could be a knife, it could be a bomb, it could be a car, it could be fists. Who knows? But if somebody is that severely mentally ill and they're a danger to themselves or others, you have to get them treatment. And that's what Kendra's Law does, and you've talked to me several times about Kendra's Law. It's a way to get the courts involved if someone needs treatment. And that's really what you need to do. So, and then he's kind of backing this onto the school shootings, which are horrific. And the Senate has passed 12 bills, safety package for schools, that we have passed, that the Assembly has failed to pass and the governor has not embraced. But the things we want to do, I think, are just common sense. School resource officers, upgrade the security systems in the schools, make sure that if there's a threat of a school shooting, that it's thoroughly investigated by all levels of law enforcement, from the federal to the state to the locals, because that's what happened in Parkland. The Sheriff's Department and the FBI knew that that person was dangerous who ended up shooting the students at Parkland, and nobody ever did anything about it. They should be required to communicate, coordinate, and follow up if there's any hint of a school shooting. Those are the common sense things that we need to do. What the governor wants to do is just be able to take someone's weapons away and let anybody make a report and not treat the person. If somebody is mentally ill, they desperately need treatment, and that's the way that we should go. And, as far as teachers making reports, they can do that now. There's a mental health professional associated with every single school district in the state. If a teacher's uncomfortable, if they're aware that one of the students has mental illness, is a danger to themselves or others, and has access to guns, they can go to the guidance counselor, they can go to the mental health professional associated with the school, whether it's a school psychologist or someone else, and they can make a report. The mental health professional is mandated by law to tell the state. So this system, as I said, already is in place. What the governor wants to do is take away someone's weapons and then not have any kind of follow-up. And I don't know why anybody would do that. It just doesn't make sense.
Talking to State Senator Cathy Young, Brittany's Law. This is something that's been in the news in the past week. Can you tell us what the law, what the law is, what it does, and the latest there?
Well, excuse me, most people are familiar with Megan's Law, which is actually modeled after. Megan's Law was passed several years ago, and that's to notify the public if there's a sex offender who is in the community. And that was based on 7-year-old Menga Kanka from New Jersey, who was killed more than 20 years ago. She was selling Girl Scout cookies. She went to a next-door neighbor's house not knowing that there were 2 or 3 sex offenders, violent sex offenders, living there, and they ended up raping and murdering Megan. And that's where Megan's Law came from. And her mother always said, her mother became a huge advocate for Megan's Law, and she said if they had known that the neighbors were violent sex offenders, of course, Megan would not have been allowed to knock on their door. So the Brittany's Law is based on that, and actually Brittany Pasalacqua was a 12-year-old girl from Geneva, New York. Her mother, Helen Buckle, had begun dating a man. She thought he was nice. She didn't have much information on his background. What she didn't know is that he had violently beaten his 1-year-old baby with a hammer previously. So he had this history of very serious domestic violence abuse. So she dated him. He ended up murdering 12-year-old Brittany and Helen. And so the concept of the law is that there would be a domestic violence database that was established, similar to Megan's Law, so that people could have knowledge if someone is convicted of a violent crime, including domestic violence. And Dale Driscoll is Helen's mother and Brittany's grandmother, and she's been a wonderful advocate. We just passed Brittany's Law again, and we passed it several times in the state, in the Senate. The Assembly has failed to take it up, but we have passed it multiple times in the Senate, and I sponsored the legislation, and we passed it again, and it would have been Helen's birthday on the day that we passed it. So it was a poignant moment, but we have to do everything that we can on the state level to protect people from violence, and whether it's making sure that there's knowledge out in the community, whether it's taking actions to keep our schools safe, whatever it is, we've got to do it, and that's what we've been really focused on over the past few months in the Senate.
We're going to take a quick break and then come back and finish up with State Senator Cathy Young. Stay with us.
Selecting a nursing home for a loved one isn't easy until you've discovered Hornell Gardens Nursing and Rehabilitation. Hornell Gardens delivers the highest level of care, compassion, and commitment with amenities and activities that will enrich body, mind, and spirit. It's a place that's close to home. Stop in for a tour of Hornell Gardens, located at 434 Monroe Avenue in Hornell, or to learn more, call 585-222-CARE or visit hurlbutcare.com.
Give the gift of life. Give blood. Tuesday, June 19th at the Hornell Veterans of Foreign Wars, post 2250 on Canastillo Street, Hornell. The hours from 1 until 6. Come in to donate this Tuesday, June 19th, to show your Red Cross support. This reminder brought to you by Lewis Garage Doors on Park Drive, Hornell, specializing in residential, commercial, and storage doors. Give them a call, 324-0271. Free estimates, reliable products, and always there in an emergency. Lewis Garage Doors, Hornell. And by GMI LLC, also known as Gray Manufacturing, on Icehouse Road, Hornell. GMI LLC is a 3-owner company formed in 2006, specializing in new or remanufacture of components related to the transit industry. Again, that blood drive coming up on Tuesday, June 19th at the Hornell VFW on Canastillo Street from 1 until 6. Come in and show your Red Cross support.
Meteorologist Rob Carolyn on the line with us. He says we've got some big boomers, some thunder this afternoon.
Potential, Brian, for some big thunderstorms later today as the cold front works its way towards the southern tier. Right now, most of the activity is north of New York State up across southern Canada. But with time, as this frontal boundary sinks south and east today, it will set us up for some showers and storms as the day goes on. Going to be partly sunny, hot and humid, 85 to 90. Brian, we have a heat advisory from 10 this morning through 8 p.m. this evening. Showers and storms will start to develop this afternoon. Biggest threat would be high winds and heavy rainfall. Sunrise this morning, 5:33. Sunset tonight at 8:50. Scattered showers and storms are possible tonight. They'll taper off late. Again, some of them may be strong through the evening, lows 60 to 65. Tomorrow turns partly sunny. There could be a leftover shower. Cooler tomorrow, 75 to 80. Tomorrow night, clear, 50 to 55. Then we're sunny, comfortable Wednesday with a high of 75 to 80, Brian.
Hey, speaking of the phrase big boomers, which is a type of firework, do we know this far ahead how the 4th is going to be, 4th of July?
Well, I can tell you, Brian, the good news is we've kind of put the pattern that we had earlier in the spring and summer behind us. It's warmed up in central Canada, so my hope is going forward that the pattern's a lot more summer-like. As to what particularly goes on the 4th, it's still a couple of weeks away. Once we get a good idea, we'll start to let you know.
Cathy Young. Senator Young, do you have a couple of minutes? I wanted to play a quick soundbite from the Fred Dicker show. Senator, you do have a minute or two left?
Sure.
Okay, this is Fred Dicker. This is Dicker's thoughts. He sums it up here, gives a synopsis of why he thinks the left is so afraid of President Trump succeeding.
Think about the fury against Donald Trump. And you think about how Trump, and this is my view, is delivering on what has long been the Republican claim that if you cut taxes and cut regulations, you could stimulate the economy and bring wealth to masses of people who never before had it. If he succeeds, that could lead to the crumbling of this whole progressive left democratic surge that's occurring right now. So that's an extra reason to keep in mind, it seems to me, why there's so much hostility to Trump.
Senator Young, I wanted to ask you that, and then my follow-up question will be, is Trump having any positive effects on the New York State economy? But your thoughts on what Dicker said there first.
Well, what he was talking about is the philosophy that we've been focused on for a long time, and that is private sector job growth and making sure that people have opportunities. We need to make sure that we have the best education possible for our kids, that they can either go to college or learn a trade or find a way to be productive and find a way to be successful in life. And you need to have the jobs. And the way that you grow jobs is to cut taxes, to make it more affordable, make New York more competitive, make sure that we don't have too much red tape. You do need some regulations, obviously. But, for example, in New York, we're constantly fighting against this suffocating tax load and the suffocating regulatory load that we have here. So it actually has discouraged jobs from locating in New York, and we actually have less jobs. We've had jobs leave, I'm sorry. So I think that whole focus on the private sector is the way to go. It can bring more prosperity, can bring, greater job numbers, and you see how the economy actually has grown jobs, record number of jobs across the country. The impact on New York State has been on Wall Street, and Wall Street had a banner year last year, and as a result, there are bonuses that are paid off Wall Street. The state receives tax money from that, and so as a result, there was an infusion of funding into the state coffers that was actually gave the legislature the ability to cut the middle income tax. It gave us the ability to fund our schools, and so it has had a very positive impact on New York. What we've got to do is take what's happening on the federal level and replicate it on the state level, and that's been the most frustrating thing for me, because we in our conference in the Senate have been fighting very hard for tax relief, regulatory relief, making sure that we can compete with other states and globally, and it is a battle, because we are constantly in battle with New York City that has just the opposite philosophy. They want to raise taxes. They want to make more regulations. They want to make sure that New York State is not a business-friendly environment. It just doesn't make sense to me. We need to nurture and grow our small businesses. We need to make sure that we have manufacturing jobs. And so that's really been my priority. But we have this constant battle back and forth between upstate and downstate, and private sector versus a lot of the priorities that they have out in New York City, and it's had an impact on us. But I would say overall, in some ways, the what's happening on the federal level is having a positive impact on New York, and we just have to roll up our sleeves and keep fighting hard and try to do more so that we can encourage job growth, so that our kids can stay after they graduate and our families can have good-paying jobs.
Senator, we are out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Next time I have you on, I want to, because I know you're on the Senate Finance Committee, you're the chairperson of the Senate Finance Committee, and I'd like to ask some de Blasio questions if I can next time. Senator Young, as always, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.